This short video is going to show you how to make a graph out of some data. So I have some sample data here in my lab notebook. I went out and I measured how far somebody could run as a function of time. And so I want to look at that in Excel. And here I've already preloaded the data. And you can see I've put time in my leftmost column and I've put distance in my rightmost column. And so it's not an accident that I put time in my left column. And I put some labels here. You don't need these. But time is what's called my x variable or my independent variable, whereas distance is my y variable or my dependent variable. The reason why this is important is Excel is expecting your leftmost column, this column, to be your x values. And it's much, much easier to use Excel if you have your x variables in the leftmost column. So how did I know that time was my independent variable? Well, time just kind of marches along. It doesn't depend on anything, but how far the runner ran, however, depends on how long they've been running. So therefore, I know that distance is my dependent variable. So once I have my x values in my left column and my y values in my right column, I need to select my data, which means I'm going to do this. Now that looked like it was pretty easy, but it actually causes a lot of problems for people. To select my data, I need to click with my left mouse, with my left mouse button, over my upper left-hand data point, and I'm going to press and hold and just drag right down across all the data that I want to graph. Now the problem is if you click here, but then you get like this black cross, and I dragged, well, that's actually copying my data, so I don't want to do that. So I'm going to say undo. And if I was here and I had this hand instead of the cross, that's actually going to replace the contents of the cell. So I'm just going to say cancel because I don't want to do that. So you have to make sure you have this solid white cross, click with your left mouse button, and drag. So once you've selected your data, you can go to the Charts button, Charts tab, and then you have to decide what type of graph you want. And this is very confusing. Many students will choose a line graph. That is not typically an appropriate graph in science. What you want is scatter. So if I go to my down arrow, you have several options. Typically the most appropriate graph is the marked scatter. So you get these data points without any lines connecting anything. So here I have a graph, but it doesn't have anything on it as far as titles. So let's go to chart layout and go on axes titles. And I want a title for my x-axis. And I also want a title for my y-axis. And finally, I want a chart title. So in order to label these appropriately, I can click here, and then I can highlight, and this is X, which is time in minutes. Always have your units. And then Y, you can click and highlight. It's a little awkward when it's sideways. So instead, if you want to, you can go right to your formula bar here, and I can just type distance in miles and hit enter. And the same with the chart title. I can either click over this and I didn't mean to move it. I could highlight like this and type, or I could go right to my formula bar and type. Distance, and just hit enter, and there is my chart title. I'll just move it into my chart. And then the other thing that I want to put in here is a trend line. So if you click on your data, go back again to chart layout and trend line right here, this button. And you could just go right here, add a linear trend line, but you do need some other options. So it's fastest to go to the trend line options. And the type, you want to make sure it's clicked as linear. Options, you want to say display equation on chart and display r squared on chart, and hit OK. So this is an equation that will allow you to interpolate or decide, or predict, for something that you don't have data for. So say for 90 minutes, if you want to know how far somebody ran in 90 minutes, you can use this equation to do so. I'm going to just quickly delete this legend because it's not helpful to us at all right now. So let's look at that. Let's look at how far our runner ran in 90 minutes. And since I'm on Excel, I'm going to use Excel for my calculations. So I need to use an equal sign, if you remember from the atomic spectroscopy lab, to tell Excel I'm entering a formula. So it equals my slope, 0.1289 times, which is the asterisk above the 8, times 90 minutes, minus 0.4533, enter. And so this is miles. So you can see in 90 minutes, our runner ran 11.1 miles. And so you want to always check on your graph to make sure you're doing this, you're doing the math properly. So yeah, 90 minutes, yeah, it looks like our runner would go about 11 miles. Okay, so conversely, say you wanted to know how long it would take somebody to go 13 miles. Well, now 13 is my y variable because distance is y. So I'd have to, again, enter a formula, and I'm going to say 13. I'm going to add back the intercept to this side of the equation and divide by my slope and hit enter. And this is saying, this is in minutes. So this says in order to go 13 miles, it would take 104 minutes, and that looks reasonable. So always check that. And then if you remember from atomic spectroscopy lab, we have a few too many decimal points here, so I'd probably want to go to probably 1 decimal place here. So then one other thing that I would like to show you is something that makes printing the chart easier. If you want to move this chart to its own page, what I just did is I right-clicked in the white area, and I can go to Move Chart. And let me show you what would happen if you were in the wrong spot. If I'm in the plot area and I right-click, I don't get that option to move my chart. If I'm, say, over the title and I right-click, again, I don't get the option to move my chart. So I have to be someplace off in the white, and then I'll have the option to move my chart. Say Move Chart as a new sheet, and I'm going to call it my graph. I can name my sheet whatever I want and say OK. And so it looks like I have to reorient a few things here. But now when you go to print this, this will print as a full page. So if you try to print off with the graph embedded in the spreadsheet, it's a little awkward to print, but this prints beautifully. And say I had multiple sheets, just one more trick. If I right click here and I hit rename, I can call this, say, data, whatever I want. But that just helps you keep track of the different sheets. So that's all. So go off and try this by yourself, and good luck.